Hello, everyone, and welcome to creating and maintaining an effective digital ecosystem for international recruitment. My name is Ellie Butler, and I'm head of marketing for North America at IDP Connect. I'm so pleased to have you tuning in to us today. Well, we're excited to be able to connect with you all virtually. We're very much looking forward to in-person NAFSA conferences again in the future when it is safe to have them. This is a pre-recorded session, but we will be available throughout the conference to answer any questions you may have or connect for a conversation. Our session today will discuss the new world of virtual international student recruitment that institutions are now navigating in the absence of boots on the ground travel. We'll explore best practices for creating an effective digital ecosystem that fits your institution's international recruitment strategy and engages prospective students. We'll also hear from two international education professionals who have quite robust digital ecosystems at their institutions. So without further ado, I will introduce our speakers for the day. As I mentioned, I am Ellie Butler, head of marketing for North America at IDP Connect, and I'm thrilled to be joined by this brilliant panel of speakers, including Laura Holmes, head of client partnerships at IDP Connect, Kirsten Feddersen, Senior Director of International Enrollment Management at Northeastern University, and Diane Nasir, Assistant Director of International Students and Scholars at the University of Wyoming. And just before we jump into the session content, I'll quickly introduce IDP Connect for those of you who may not know us. IDP Connect is unrivaled in providing the higher education sector with a trusted, full funnel strategic recruitment solution. From a student's initial search through to their arrival on campus, IDP offers students and institutions a seamless omni-channel journey that places human interaction at its heart. At IDP, we are proud to be able to say that as we evolve and build our business, we do so with the student at the center. Whatever stage of their journey, we are by their side, available 24/7 via our digital platforms and by building trusted human relationships through our network of qualified counselors. By placing students at the heart of everything we do, we know that we are providing them with the right advice and providing institutions with the right students. We have a physical network of student-facing offices in over 30 countries, pictured here in the dark orange, and we send students to major English-speaking destination countries, pictured here in the yellow. We have over 900 counselors throughout this network, so we are truly embedded within the markets in which we operate, and students really trust the IDP name. Alongside the physical network, we also have the largest digital presence of any international student service provider across our websites and our mobile app. We operate over 30 student-facing sites across Hot Courses and IDP.com. And this map here highlights our Hot Courses sites across the globe, which are all locally hosted. So you can see the .br here for Brazil and the .vn for Vietnam and so on. And because we have access to the largest community of international students in the world, with over 100 million annual visits to these websites, we subsequently hold the largest combined data set on international student behavior in the world. Therefore, we are uniquely positioned to be able to discuss digital ecosystems for international recruitment, and our partnerships with over 700 institutions around the globe mean that we have a really comprehensive view into the digital practices that are paying off the most for institutions. So what exactly is a digital ecosystem, and what do we mean when we say this? Well, simply put, your digital ecosystem for international recruitment involves all of the tools, activities, events, ads, and content that you utilize to reach and engage international students through digital platforms. So the web, email, social media, apps, and more. And why is this important to have? Well, obviously, over the past year, institutions have had to quickly pivot and transition all recruitment activities to digital platforms. And some have really become quite sophisticated in their capabilities, as you'll see in our institutional partners presentations a bit later on. In addition, an optimized digital ecosystem supports the entire admissions funnel, from prospective students who have never even heard of your institution through to enrolled students and even alumni engagement post-graduation. Digital tools help to address a number of common challenges that institutions are often facing. And we know this from the many conversations that we have with our partners. For example, tight resources, especially during the pandemic. So everyone has been asked to do more with less, whether those are human resources or financial resources. International recruiters need support in attracting and communicating with students. Another challenge is the need for volume. So most every institution that we speak to wants to grow their international student population and needs assistance in doing so. In addition, increasing diversity and reaching new markets, all while travel is off limits, is quite a challenge. It's impossible to be physically present in every market that you'd like to recruit from, especially during COVID-19, but digital tools allow you to build your brand presence and build a pipeline. In addition, there is increasing demand for strategies that are backed on data and analytics and tools that provide full transparency when it comes to your results and ROI. So the ability to track everything you do is so critical so that you can keep your senior leadership informed and easily understand the ROI of your efforts. So in order to begin addressing these challenges and optimizing your digital ecosystem, there are several questions that you should ask yourself to evaluate which stage you need the most support. For example, at the very top of the funnel here, you'll want to know if you're getting students' eyes on your content. Are you showing up in places and on websites where students are searching? How many impressions is your content getting? And are you even currently measuring this? How are students finding your website? When it comes to lead generation, you'll want to ask if enough students are actively filling out your inquiry form online and providing you with a steady, healthy stream of prospects. It's not enough to just purchase lists and blindly email students. Rather, you want to generate leads who are actively interested in hearing from you. They found your content online and they want to know more. You'll also want to look at the quality and diversity of leads. Are they coming from a broad range of markets? And then for engaging these leads, you'll want to take a look at your email open and click rates. You'll want to assess if students are actually finding what they need on your website. What does your bounce rate look like on Google Analytics? If you're running any sort of retargeting campaigns, which you should, are they reaching the right leads and are they getting you impressions? And do students want to take the next step? Do they want to meet with your recruitment staff virtually and attend your webinars? When it comes to students applying, are you receiving enough applications to meet your volume targets? And importantly, can you track which digital tools students used in their journey? What is the quality and diversity of your applicant pool like? And finally, when it comes to yielding these students and getting them excited about showing up on your campus, you want to assess the attendance rate at your virtual events and the content that you're providing to them in the time leading up to their start date. Are they getting excited? Are they staying engaged with your institution? Now, after you've asked yourself all of these questions, you can start to identify which area you need to invest the most time and resources into, and which digital tools you need to adopt to support those areas. So having a really robust presence on student search sites so that you can get student eyes on your content is critical for the awareness stage. We know that students are starting their journey online with broad searches for the best programs and the best institutions, and it's highly unlikely that your institution is showing up in the top of those search results. Rather, it's college search aggregators such as our Hot Courses and IDP sites that are showing up first in those results. So it's really critical that you have a robust presence there so that students can view your profile, shortlist their favorite institutions, and ultimately submit inquiries to your institution. You can also leverage sponsored social media posts and web display ads and attend virtual recruitment fairs to support student awareness at this stage and get your institution's content in front of students who might not have heard of you. When it comes to lead generation, you'll want to make sure that you have really compelling digital assets to share on your institutional profile on those college search sites that we just discussed and in any sponsored advertising that you're doing in order to capture student interest and drive them to submit their information in your inquiry form or click through to your website. In order to then engage those leads, ideally your institution would have a robust CRM that works well for international recruiters. I know that is not the case in several institutions that we speak to. Many are currently working on CRM implementation now. So really just ensuring that you have an email service provider that works for you if you don't have a CRM currently in place, so that you can engage with your leads and send them compelling content. You can also do retargeting campaigns on the web and social media to keep your institution top of mind for those students who have already submitted inquiries to your institution. And you also should have frequent webinars and online events at this stage. And finally, when it comes to applications, admissions, and yield, you'll want to have frequent online events again. You'll want to make it easy for students to communicate with current international students at your institution through things like peer-to-peer chat platforms, and to get a glimpse of student life through things like student vlogs and live social media events. And of course, you'll want to keep engaging students with email and compelling content. Now, it goes without saying, throughout all stages in this funnel, you'll want to use data in order to inform all of those strategies and in order to be able to track the ROI of your efforts. So at this stage, I will pass it over to Laura, who will go a bit more in depth on some of the key elements of a successful digital ecosystem.
Thank you, Ellie. As Ellie just mentioned, data is certainly a very key and important piece of information that you might want to use in your defining of your strategy. What we're looking at here, this is actually the Open Doors information. So IIE had given IDP Connect permission to create these nice dashboards, which takes that information from the Open Doors report. It makes it easy to follow. So I wanted to give a live example of an institution that I had recently had a discussion with, who had said to me, you know, I have plenty of students and international students that are enrolled in our STEM programs, but I really need to figure out a way to connect with students that might be interested in our College of Arts. So I took this information, and you can see here that I have clicked specifically into Fine and Applied Arts. And then on the right-hand side, this is showing me the top 10 countries of origin by enrollment. So I really wanted to take this information and see what types of trends that I might be seeing. So obviously China, Korea, India, those seem to be pretty stable. So I'm already capturing those students. Those are the students that are already applying to the programs at this College of Art. But here you're seeing a big jump from 2019 to 2020 for Brazil. So that was an area that I had made a recommendation on to this institution that they may want to focus on and create a strategy around. If you want to go to the next section. Okay, thank you. What we're looking at here is our demand tracker tool through IDP Connect. So IDP Connect takes the Open Doors information, but it then kind of builds upon that, because what we're looking at here is international students that are searching in real time. So I wanted to look specifically at the students that are searching across our sites, specifically at programs that fall under creative art and design. And on the right-hand side, you can also then see what some of the top countries are. So Brazil does fall within the top 4, and that was an area that was showing a growing interest. So I had made the recommendation to this institution that, you know, maybe we come up with a digital strategy to focus specifically on students in Brazil and really push your programs that fall within your College of Art and Design. If you want to click one more time, thank you. So obviously Brazil is a very large market. So I wanted to also figure out what are the best cities that I may want to focus on. So Sao Paulo, Rio de Janeiro, just looking even at those 2 cities, that's over 20% of the students are from those 2 areas. So I then put together kind of a strategy that was focusing on Brazilian students specifically in these cities. And then on the right-hand side, it just kind of gives you a bit more information on the specific programs of interest. So it's really taking the data that you have available and piecing it all together to help to define a strategy. Another very important thing to keep in mind when creating your digital strategy is that international students are a bit different than domestic students, and they really start their search journey well in advance. So only 21% of students will start their studies within 12 months of starting their initial research. So you can see here that a huge percentage of students are starting well in advance. So you want to make sure that you're always creating a strategy that is targeting students at their initial search journey and then continuing to stay in touch with those students. One other very important piece of information is to make sure that you're creating content that international students are interested in. So I'm sure you all know you get often the same types of questions. So what programs does your institution offer? What's the cost? Where are you located? What are the entry requirements? So it's really important that you make this information easily found, not only on your website, but also on the areas where students are starting that initial search journey. So whether it be, a profile on IDP Connect, or any of the other profiles that are out there, just making this information very easily found. It's also important to let students know what your school looks like. So I always tell schools, focus on showing pictures of your institution, showing what your students look like, using video, using student testimonials, that type of information to really tell your story and to help build your brand. Another key element is, obviously, Ellie touched upon this a bit more previously, but really just staying engaged with students. So as students are showing interest and they're inquiring to you, continue to stay engaged with those students and let them know other things that you have going on that are relevant to what they're interested in. So maybe you're doing a virtual open day and you want to invite those students to come there. It's just reminding and staying top of mind with those students. Another piece that Ellie had touched upon was retargeting. So this is just an example on the right-hand side here that's showing an ad for Boston Architectural College. So what we did for this particular campaign was we targeted students that were searching not only Boston Architectural on our sites, but also their competitors and students that were searching for programs that they offer, so that when that student leaves our sites, an ad for their institution is going to show up, because we know that that student is already interested in those programs, and we want to continue to reach those students while they're thinking about studying abroad at that moment. Another very important piece is to track your success. So this is actually a screenshot of the IDP Connect Discovery dashboards and any type of information that you can have access to. This will help you really to paint a picture on how successful your digital marketing is. So what we're looking at here is the number of students that viewed your specific institution, how many students then clicked the visit website button and went from our sites to your own site. How many leads did you receive from that? Another important piece and recommendation that I would make is, if you are purchasing profiles on different sites, set up Google Analytics so that way you can see where the traffic to your website is coming from. And then finally, just better tracking allows for more effective strategies moving forward. So what we're looking at here is just taking a look at those students that viewed the profile from the prior slide, but giving it a global view and saying, okay, what are the areas of opportunity and where am I seeing growth? So this is just showing you that the darker the color is obviously where there's more interest. So it's just taking all of this information, piecing it together, and then building a more effective strategy. So from there, I'm going to pass it on to Kirsten Feddersen from Northeastern University so she can speak a bit more about how she's using this at her own institution.
Thank you, Laura and Ellie. As Ellie mentioned before, I am the Senior Director of International Enrollment Management at Northeastern University. My name is Kirsten Feddersen, and I'm going to be speaking a little bit about what this digital ecosystem looks like at Northeastern. Just like everybody else, we've been challenged by this past year and a number of years before that by some of the political conversations we've all been a part of. And in this past year, we've had to be very mindful about how we're approaching not only student recruitment, but also nurture through the pipeline. As many of you might know, we have a very large population of international students, currently the second largest in the US, which is a wonderful situation to be in, but also one that is risky when something happens that we can't control that impacts the number of students who are able to travel to the US. So COVID and similar situations put us in a very precarious position, so to speak, because we have a lot to lose when things go wrong. So this is something we have to be very mindful of. One of the strong factors in the large international population that we have is the co-op program that some of you might have heard of. We have a very strong experience-based co-op program where students have the opportunity to gain work experience before they graduate, and this is a brand that's already very strong across a number of markets. So we're in a fortunate position that a lot of the markets that we're going into, students will already have some knowledge of who we are. but in other markets they don't. So it's sort of a mixed bag when we're going out to try to build new funnels. Previously, Northeastern was in a position where we were recruiting for our graduate programs primarily through an external provider. But for the last couple of years, we've been doing this in-house. I think it's around 3 years at this point, and where we've spent a lot of time really building this infrastructure to make sure that prospective students, from the point at which they enter the funnel, are able to find their way through to the point of matriculation. From a brand recognition perspective, Northeastern is fortunate enough to have a large organic pool. And when I say organic, I mean one where we don't necessarily know how they found us. So this could be through some of our existing branding efforts. It could be that they spoke to a friend or they have a family member. It could be any variety of reason, but organic simply means we don't know how they found us and how they made their way into our pool. The quality of leads varies greatly. So while we're fortunate to have this large pool of leads, there's a lot in there that we shouldn't be spending our time on. And one of the challenges we have is really identifying the right leads. So the ones that are likely to actually become the type of student that we're looking for and ultimately enroll at Northeastern. So with that, the high level goals for us right now is, first and foremost, we're looking to rebuild some of the markets that were impacted by COVID. Just like everybody else, or like many other institutions at least, we were relying on enrollments from a couple of major markets, all of which were impacted by COVID. And so once again, we've all learned the lesson not to over rely on a single market, and that having smaller funnels is still better than relying exclusively on larger ones. So that's part of what we're aiming to do right now. And then we're also trying to build new markets for diversity. And by diversity, I mean two different things. I mean, a more diverse population of students, which ultimately leads to a better student experience for our enrolled students, but also diversifying our portfolio from a business perspective to make sure that we don't end up in the same situation again. We're then also trying to optimize the conversion from our existing pipeline. As I mentioned before, we have a very large lead pool, and we're trying to really identify the students who are going to ultimately enroll at Northeastern. And then lastly, finding better quality candidates for selective programs. There are some programs where we're getting a lot of volumes, but they're highly selective. And so even though the lead pool is large, they may not necessarily live up to the requirements set forth by the colleges. So in terms of lead gen, at Northeastern, we're kind of looking at it in two different buckets. We have the lead gen component at the front. We're trying to get net new leads into our stream. And then once we have them in the stream, the other piece is nurture. How do we get them from having entered our stream through the system to the point of matriculation on the other end? So if we're looking at lead gen, as I mentioned before multiple times, we have this significant lead pool, but the question is the quality there? And we don't necessarily want to rely just on an organic lead pool. So we're trying to be a little bit more deliberate about how we're building our pipeline, in addition to what's sort of coming to us organically. The pieces under that are, first and foremost, we do a lot of paid search, meaning not even sort of higher education specific methods, but just marketing in general, paid search on search engines, and a lot of digital advertising in select markets as well. And even though this is by far the harder pieces to measure in terms of an actual enrollment, and I will say, when we measure success, I know there's some different conversations about this. All the partial goals that we have towards enrollment. So, we may have a lead goal, we may have an application goal. Ultimately, unless those students enroll, those goals don't mean a whole lot. So the ultimate goal will always be whatever we're doing at the front end, it has to lead to an enrollment one way or another. Otherwise, the investment just isn't worth it. So that's the ultimate goal, of course. And so this is where it's harder for us to measure it, because we know that we're putting our brand out there, excuse me, but we can't necessarily see whether this leads to actual enrollment or not. But we have faith in the fact that this is helping us to establish our brand, because our organic lead pool is telling us that something is working. So we're working with an external marketing agency for that. And in addition to that, we're also, in some cases, working with local marketing agencies in other countries. There are countries where it's simply easier for us to contract with somebody who's able to help us manage the brand in that region. So that's another tactic that we have taken advantage of. And then we work with providers such as IDP Connect, for instance, for lead gen. And then in the case of IDP, one of the advantages is that IDP's agency side, who we also work with, are able to pick up a lot of those leads and nurture them through to enrollment once the lead has been generated. So we're managing some of the leads ourselves, but the majority of them are really being managed by the agency side, which certainly takes the workload off of us. So we've been working with IDP for over a year at this point, and it's certainly a strategy that is helping us establish our brand again across a variety of different regions. We're also working with local lead vendors in a variety of different regions, including Africa, India, Southeast Asia, and a few other places where they have sometimes a little local chunk of the market, and we see it as a nice supplement to some of the larger providers. And so far, that's helped us establish ourselves in some of the smaller markets. We then also, as most others, rely on recruitment events. A lot of this is for building the brand recognition, but also in some cases, building on the brand recognition that's already been established. So where the theory is that we're out there building our brand through paid search, digital advertising, and then when we go to the fairs, in a lot of cases, the students will already know who we are, and so we can continue the conversation from there. And Laura, Ellie mentioned this earlier, having proper marketing assets is a really important piece in this regard, because I think what we sometimes see is that we make an effort to really establish the brand recognition and to get students in on the front end. But then once they're looking for more information, for instance, when they go to our website to confirm the information that we gave them during an information session or a fair, or they come home and they want to look at some kind of flyer to remind themselves of what we said, or some other piece of marketing asset, if that doesn't correspond with what we've promoted to them, then we lose part of that momentum. So having the proper assets in place are really important. So how do we measure effectiveness of all of this? One of the biggest challenges for us certainly is measuring the outcome of brand recognition, or measuring the recognition of our brand from some of these initiatives that has served just that purpose. And this includes IDP Connect as well. However, what we've seen in a number of cases is when we take those efforts away, it impacts the pipeline. So it's an investment that we are willing to make, and that has served us well so far. So I think the question is also, and I've always been a strong proponent of being able to measure ROI on investments, but at the same time, just because we can't measure it, it doesn't mean that it isn't effective. And so it's something to keep in mind if you supplement other measurable marketing efforts and recruitment efforts with brand building recognition, which again is a little more difficult to pin down in terms of measuring outcomes. It may just be a good combination. So in terms of nurture, this is the other piece that I mentioned earlier. What we're trying to do at Northeastern is really focusing on, okay, we've gotten our customers' attention. How do we maintain that through to the point of matriculation? And Laura and Ellie mentioned this earlier, being able to track interactions with students is really crucial to success, particularly in a complex organization such as Northeastern. There are, throughout the student journey through the system, many university stakeholders involved. And so what will often happen for us is a student will get in touch and say, well, I talked to one of your colleagues, or I talked to somebody who sent me an email, or maybe I talked to them on the phone, and it becomes a lot of this he said, she said, and a game of telephone. Having a CRM that tracks who said what through the system, and this includes something like Five9 to track your outbound calls and inbound calls. This will really be a better customer experience, and it will also prevent students from slipping through the cracks, which means, all that money we spent in recruiting them on the front end, we don't want that to be a wasted investment. So that's a crucial piece of it. So the NU life cycle looks like this. We have new leads that enter our system on the front end through a variety of these different initiatives that I mentioned on my last slide. Once they enter the system, they typically go on to an automated nurture stream. We have international specific nurture that goes out, and then selectively we follow up in person. As I mentioned multiple times already, with the volume of leads that we have, it's simply not feasible or necessarily constructive or productive to follow up with every single lead, because many of them don't necessarily have a genuine interest in studying with us. So it's all about finding the ones that do. So after that, we have a key message. The information that we're disseminating to students is this notion of providing access to help and information. It's less hard sales and pursuing students. It's more, we're letting you know that we're here if you need you, and that has served us quite well. I think our domestic strategy is different in that regard, and is a little more of a regular sales pursuit, where on the international side, it is more of a we're here for you, which is also why we have a large team of individuals who help us recruit, but also nurture students through the pipeline. There is a designated team for that, which has served us quite well. After this, we have typically through the pipeline, again, going on this notion of access to information. We offer events. We try to turn them around quite quickly, ad hoc events, either Q&A sessions about particular hot topics. During COVID, we had a lot of those, as you can probably imagine. And also just in-demand topics in general. If we have a lot of students asking about a new program that we're offering at one of our regional campuses, or immigration questions or anything like that, we will try to offer those sessions on an ongoing basis as we're moving closer to the intake. And this is all promoted through Marketo. And then as we move through the funnel, the focus gradually shifts over to the colleges who are picking up more of that engagement with the students, and my team then sort of backs off a little bit and hands the student over, but letting them know that they're there for them throughout the experience. And as we've mentioned before, the technology really enhances the customer experience, where we need to make sure that they're able to flow smoothly through this pipeline. So with that, the lessons learned, there's a couple of different ones. Investments should impact your bottom line. This is what I mentioned earlier. I think sometimes there is this tendency to set milestones along the way and say, well, we made this investment and it gave us this many applications, or we did these activities and we ended up getting, this many deposits. Unless those students enroll, is that really a good investment? And at Northeastern, it's simply not. And so we need to be able to deliver on the promises that we make up front to make sure that students actually stay with us through the pipeline up to the point of matriculation, or through the funnel to the point of matriculation. Customer experience is key. What I've seen across several of the institutions that I've worked for is that we sometimes forget, and I've been guilty of this myself, that what we want to give is not necessarily the same as what the customer wants. And so we need to put ourselves in their position and really look at what this looks like from a communication perspective. I think COVID has challenged all of us on that point. And so we need to make sure that we're always taking that perspective into consideration. And lastly, measure as much as you can. It doesn't mean you can measure everything. That is certainly the end goal. If there are ambiguities, it shouldn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't be pursuing that strategy, because if it is effective, even though you can't measure it, it still may be worth it in the end. With that, I will hand it over to Diane, who will provide the perspective from University of Wyoming. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Hi, everyone. I am Diane Nasir, and I'm an assistant director here at the Office of International Students and Scholars at the University of Wyoming. Today, I'll be continuing the conversation on creating and maintaining an effective digital ecosystem for international recruitment from the perspective of all of us here at ISS and what we have done this past year. So the key aspect to an effective digital ecosystem for us is that it has to be holistic and robust. So there are three things that I wanted to talk about today. First is creating content. So creating videos, creating student blogs, also coordinating social media takeovers. Number two is to making sure that you share all that content through your social media that's available throughout your campus and also worldwide as well, and in terms of sharing it with in-country advisors and also Education USA. And last but not least, I'll talk about utilizing IDP Connect and leveraging that partnership through the dashboard. Going into the pandemic, we had hired a student worker to collect student testimonials and kind of stitch it up all together. So at first we didn't really know how it would look like, but after a while you will learn to tailor your questions to what may highlight some of the key aspects of your students' experiences. So for us, we also always wanted to highlight our generous scholarships and also the great outdoors that Laramie, Wyoming has to offer. And the most important thing is that you get to highlight your world-class academic programs as well. So what we have created internally in ISS and also in collaboration with institutional marketing are more videos of our students that are representative of their academic levels and the regions that they're from. So, and also for student blogs, we reach out to our top graduate students that are doing state-of-the-art research and share those stories on our social media platforms. And as you know, students want to see students in action on campus and in town. So what we have done this year in collaboration with a few Education USA offices worldwide is to coordinate social media takeovers. Last but not least, I did want to talk about our partnership with IDP Education through their IDP Connect platform. The three things that really stood out to us is one, the ability to reach out to students in their respective languages via hot courses. Number two, the generation of quality leads. And number three, as you can see, the amazing traffic that we have through click-throughs and also reaching out to countries all over the world that we didn't necessarily travel to before this. Next, I wanted to reinforce the idea of sharing your content on all of your social media platforms. As you know, different demographics utilize different platforms. For an example, WeChat for China and Twitter for our Saudi students. So you can also explore the idea of sharing these stories through your intensive English program social media platforms, graduate education, or even through academic programs across campus. Don't forget to email the links to high school counselors and sponsors and marketers that have the ability to embed this content onto their respective websites. Thank you everyone for listening in on my part of the presentation today. Feel free to get in touch if you have any questions, and I'll pass it back to Ellie for the key takeaways.
Thank you so much, Diane, and thank you, Kirsten, for the fantastic insights into the digital ecosystems at each of your institutions. So we see some key themes emerge here through both of their presentations. The first is that brand building and top of the funnel activities are absolutely critical. So what are you doing to raise your profile globally and generate leads for your institution within your digital ecosystem? It is the critical first step of any digital ecosystem. And secondly, once you have those leads and you have generated interest in your institution, what are you doing to maintain that interest and to nurture those leads? Do you have the proper marketing assets in order to do so? And finally, how are you measuring outcomes and tracking the success and ROI of all of your efforts throughout your digital ecosystem? As Kirsten mentioned, none of this matters if we aren't ultimately enrolling students into our institutions. So being sure to measure at every step you can, track every touch point with students that you are able to, and ultimately gauge the ROI of your efforts in order to ensure that your digital ecosystem is effective and can be maintained. And with that, we will close the session. I'd like to thank you all for staying with us today. I hope you enjoyed. We all will be present at the NAFSA conference, so please do reach out to us if you'd like to have a conversation. Alternatively, my email address is here on the slide, and we would absolutely love to hear from you. So once again, thank you to our fantastic panel of speakers, and we hope that you all take care.